Sometimes a single military operation can set off this huge global chain reaction, with consequences that ripple out way beyond the initial headlines. And that is exactly what happened with the recent U.S. intervention in Venezuela. So today, we're going to unpack that chain reaction step by step and try to understand its impact on pretty much everything, from oil prices all the way to the future of the U.S. dollar.
So where did this all begin? Well, it all started with one single, really dramatic event. An operation that didn't just target a leader, but sent shockwaves through the entire geopolitical world.
Picture this, January 3rd, 2026. The world wakes up to some absolutely stunning news. The United States had launched a military operation right in the heart of Venezuela, and they'd captured President Nicolas Maduro. This was not just some regional story, this was a global shockwave.
Okay, so the official name for this mission was Operation Absolute Resolve. The justification the U.S. gave was that they were capturing a leader they'd labeled a narco-terrorist, basically accusing him of using drug trafficking to fund terror. The goal was to get Maduro and his wife out of there, to face charges in the U.S. But the plan for what happened next? Well, that was anything but clear.
And this confusion was obvious right from the very top. I mean, on one hand, you had President Trump talking about turning Venezuela into a U.S. protectorate, rebuilding its oil industry. But then, on the other hand, his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, laid out a totally different vision. No direct U.S. rule, just using things like blockades to influence them from a distance.
So with all that chaos as a backdrop, the world's attention immediately snapped to one thing: oil. An intervention in a country that sits on the world's largest oil reserves has to be about controlling oil prices, right?
It really seems like the obvious answer, doesn't it? The U.S. goes in, secures this massive source of oil, and brings down prices for everyone at the pump. It's a simple story, a compelling one, but the data tells us it's just not the right one.
In fact, according to the experts, it's not about that at all. Samantha Gross, over at the Brookings Institution, she put it really bluntly. The idea that this whole operation was about grabbing oil to control prices is, and I quote, nonsense. Now, the reason is actually pretty simple. Decades of, frankly, mismanagement have just crippled Venezuela's oil industry. Just look at the data. Production has totally collapsed from over 3 million barrels a day back in 2000 to less than 1 million now. That's under 1% of total global output. Venezuela just isn't a big enough player right now to cause a big price shock.
And you know what? The market's reaction totally confirms this. There wasn't some widespread panic, no crazy sell-off. Instead, the market stayed pretty calm, and the money started moving in a very specific and very deliberate direction.
And this brings us to the second and, maybe even more significant ripple effect. While everybody was busy watching oil, the real story was happening in the market for precious metals. So the smart money wasn't panicking, it was hedging. Investors and central banks, they saw this whole intervention not as some short-term oil crisis, but as a big sign of long-term geopolitical uncertainty. And their response was to make a run for tangible physical assets. And get this wasn't a new trend. It just put it into overdrive. Look at this number. Central banks had already snapped up over 1,000 tons of gold for their reserves back in 2024. The Venezuelan intervention just poured gasoline on that fire. And this really gets to the heart of the psychology of the whole thing. The big move into gold isn't just about being afraid of a market crash. No, it's a hedge against a decline in trust. Trust in political stability, trust in international agreements, and even trust in the future of money itself. So, this breakdown of trust, it leads us directly to our third major ripple effect, the quiet but steady challenge to the US dollar's role as the world's #1 reserve currency. You've probably heard this term thrown around, de-dollarization. It's this gradual global shift where countries are trying to depend less on the dollar, which also means depending less on US financial and foreign policy.
Now, this trend didn't just start overnight. This timeline shows a process that's been unfolding for decades, from the U.S. ending the gold standard way back in '71 to the launch of the euro, to heavy sanctions on Russia. Each one of these events chipped away at the dollar's dominance, and this intervention in Venezuela is just the latest and maybe the most powerful push in that direction.
So why are they doing it? Well, the motivation is actually pretty simple. Nations are watching things like Russia's assets getting frozen or this intervention in Venezuela, and they're deciding they don't want their economic fate tied to what one source calls gunboat diplomacy, foreign policy that's backed by the threat of force. And look, this is not just a theory. The data shows a real tangible decline. Since the euro came on the scene in 1999, the dollar's share of global reserves has dropped from over 70% to just over 56%. The trend is right there in black and white. It's undeniable.
Okay, so let's put this all together. We've got this erosion of trust, the flight to gold, de-dollarization. What does this new world actually look like? And more importantly, how do you even navigate it? Well, some analysts have come up with a handy framework for it. They call it Pluto. The world is becoming more polarized, with these hardening geopolitical blocks. It's liquid, meaning alliances can shift in a heartbeat. Nations are acting unilaterally. The whole environment is tense. And it's omni-relational, which just means a military action in one country can instantly mess up supply chains on the complete other side of the world.
This new reality, it demands a whole new way of thinking about investing. That old focus on just pure efficiency and low cost, it's dead. Now, security is everything, even if it means higher costs and inflation sticking around. Sectors like defense and natural resources suddenly look a lot more attractive. And critically, you have to stop trying to make simple forecasts and start planning for sudden, radical scenarios, because as we've just seen, they can, and they absolutely do happen. Which leaves us all with one final, really crucial question. As the international rules we've all known for decades start to crumble, and when trust in institutions and even currencies starts to fade, what becomes the true measure of security and value? It's a question that central banks, investors, and entire nations are now trying to figure out every single day.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. We're starting smack in the middle of a geopolitical firestorm, one with consequences that reach far, far beyond just one country. Because really, this isn't just a story about Venezuela, it's a story about the future of money itself.
Now look at this date. It's not in the past. We're talking about January 3rd, 2026. A hypothetical scenario, sure, but a very plausible one that signals a huge escalation on the world stage.
So, picture this. In a pretty shocking nighttime raid, U.S. forces capture Venezuela's controversial leader, Nicolas Maduro. He's then flown straight to New York to face narco-trafficking charges, and that move alone sends massive shockwaves through global politics. And right on the heels of that, the White House comes out with this huge promise. American companies are going to pour billions into rebuilding Venezuela's absolutely shattered oil industry. It's framed as this golden opportunity for U.S. energy. But here's the thing. This raid, it doesn't happen in a bubble. At the very same time, you've got these other, seemingly random things happening in markets all over the world, and they're all hinting that something much, much bigger is going on.
You see gold prices just explode. We're talking smashing all-time records. And analysts are saying it's not just regular market jitters. They're calling it a surge in geopolitical anxiety. Basically, investors are running for cover.
Meanwhile, over in Beijing, they are in a real bind. For years, they've had these massive oil-for-debt deals with Venezuela. But now, all of a sudden, the oil that was supposed to pay back those loans, it's under U.S. control. That is a huge problem.
So, what's the common thread here? You've got a military raid, gold going through the roof, and Chinese debt at risk. How do these pieces fit together? Well, the answer is they're all part of a war that's been brewing for years, a quiet war, fought with currency, not with soldiers. To really get what's happening, we've got to pull the lens back a bit and look at this powerful global trend that's been building in the background for a long, long time. It's challenging the very foundations of our financial world. And it all revolves around this one key idea: de-dollarization. Now, this isn't some dusty old economic term anymore. For a growing number of countries, this has become a matter of national security.
You know, the dollar has been king since way back in 1944. But as you can see on this timeline, there have been these key moments, like when the U.S. cut the dollar's tie to gold, and especially more recently, the heavy use of sanctions that have really lit a fire under major powers to find another way to do business.
And it really boils down to a few key reasons. For countries like Russia and China, it's all about making themselves sanction-proof. But it's also about a bigger shift. This idea that we're not living in a US-dominated world anymore. It's what they call a multipolar world. And look, this isn't just talk. This is happening right now. Countries are literally building a whole new financial system from the ground up, creating new rails to move money completely outside of the dollar's influence. Think of these as the new plumbing for global money.
You've got China's CIPS system, which is a direct competitor to SWIFT. That's the main system banks use. And then you have these new projects like Enbridge that let countries trade directly using their own digital currencies, totally skipping the US dollar.
Okay, so this brings us right back to Venezuela. And here's the crucial point. This whole thing isn't just about oil or fighting drug trafficking. It is a major power move in this currency war. By taking control of the world's biggest oil reserves, the U.S. is trying to reinforce the dollar's grip on the global energy trade.
But there's a huge difference between the official story and what's actually possible on the ground. The administration is talking about a quick 18-month fix. You talk to industry experts, they're saying, no way, that's pure fantasy. And here's why. The country's oil infrastructure is just a complete wreck. I mean, think about it. Only one of their 4 essential oil upgraders is even working. And the number of drilling rigs, it's fallen off a cliff from 67 all the way down to just 2. 2! An energy analyst really put it best. This is not going to be cheap, this is not going to be fast, and this is not going to be easy. We're talking years of work and probably almost double the investment that's being talked about.
So where does all this leave us? What's the big takeaway here? What does this flashpoint in Venezuela really tell us about the future of the global economy?
Well, the bottom line is this. The Venezuela situation isn't creating a new trend. It's a massive accelerator. It's basically pouring gasoline on a fire that was already burning, forcing countries to pick a side in this new, fracturing financial world. And in this new, messy landscape, the real thing backing any currency isn't going to be gold, and it isn't going to be oil. It all comes down to something much more fragile, much more human: trust. Trust in the institutions, trust in the stability, trust in the policies. And that really leaves us with the big question for the years ahead. As the old system cracks apart and the old certainties disappear, what, or maybe who, are we all going to choose to trust?